Hello, everyone. Welcome to Creative Writers and Illustrators. And my guest for the day is Himani Dalmia, author of Thammi's Gift. It's a picture book which has been published by Harper Collins. It's based on the life of one of India's foremost librarian, Bandana Sen. Let's find out more. Hello, Himani. I'm happy to have you here.
It's lovely to be here, Shamla, talking about our favorite subject, books and more books. Yeah.
I'm so glad somebody featured Thammi's library, and I was very curious to know, why did you decide to, write a book now? I mean, she's created this library years ago, and, your kids have been part of this journey. So why now?
It was a very organic process. So the library, Thammi, which is what my children called their grandmother, Bandana Sen. She started creating this library when my first daughter was born, and my first daughter is 7.5 now. And it was, of course, a continuous process. She was adding to it all the time. She passed away very suddenly 4.5 years ago. And, so the library came to an abrupt, end, in the sense that it was incomplete. It was fairly complete up till 5 years or so. And after that, she was kind of still working on it. So it was work in progress. But, it was during the pandemic that the library really made its presence felt in our lives, because especially during those strict lockdowns, the first strict lockdown where you couldn't even like order books online, you couldn't visiting our neighborhood library, we were lucky that we have one in the neighborhood, a very good one, wasn't possible. Visiting bookstores wasn't possible. Activities were very limited. We couldn't go out with the kids. And I mean, how much baking and sensory play can one do in a day? So it was really the library that filled up our day, because we explored the length and breadth of it. Both my kids at that point, in the beginning, aged like 2.5 and 4.5, were, there would be many pockets in the day where we would be at a loss about what to do, and reading those books would really knit our day together. And I was talking about this with a few, just a casual conversation with my more, book loving, literary minded friends. And Kanishka, who was my agent for my other book, and was also, he's a literary agent, and he was curating a series for scroll.in on publishing and the pandemic. So he said that he would love it if I would write an article about the role the home library has played for us during the pandemic for Scroll. So I wrote that, and I realized that it actually hit home with a lot of people, and a lot of people loved the story. A lot of people had known my mother-in-law, or the story resonated with them about the role that books can play in early childhood. So from there, it just organically occurred to me that perhaps this would make a good picture book. I think that's just the phase of life that I am in, because I am reading so much with my children. So I'm so immersed in that world that it just kind of occurred to me that maybe this would make a good picture book. And I spoke with Kanishka about it. The person who came to mind to me immediately was Priya, because I love her work. She's such a talented illustrator. And and we spoke with Harper Collins. I mean, well, several publishers, but Harper Collins really jumped at it, and everything fit really well. So and Priya luckily agreed to the project as well. So it all just kind of organically came together in that process. From the pandemic and the writing of the Scroll article to the story materializing, and then it takes its own time, like a year or so, to get it together, with the illustrations and all of that. So that is the answer to why now.
I've read the Scroll article that you're mentioning, and I would like to tell our viewers it's a really useful and in-depth article, so do check it out. So, you are a parent counselor, right?
Yeah.
So you've been interacting with parents and grandparents. So when you look around, how lucky or I say blessed your children are that they have received books. Because I think that's like one of the books are the best gifts a child can receive either from parents or grandparents because they are tangible, accessible, and enjoyable. So, what are your observations when you look around, how useful these books have been for your kids, and, how books have can play a larger role in the lives of more children?
Yeah. I think that having access to books is extremely important. So whether that access is, I mean, if possible, I would say, access at home, like prioritizing that as an investment. I honestly look at it as an investment. I think that the kind of books, the kind of gifts that books give to children, just in terms of not just pleasure and joy, and something enjoyable to do, and something that builds connection between the child and the parent or the grandparent or whoever is reading to the child, but also in terms of, there are so many studies that link early reading with later literacy, the benefits to cognition, to comprehension, to understanding, the ability to think. I mean, the gifts are honestly endless where reading is concerned. I look at books as an investment, and I mean picture books. I'm not talking about academic books or activity books or anything that has a learning or didactic objective. I'm talking about pure literature for children. So when, the idea of this library was honestly in that context. It was that my mother-in-law said to us when we were going to have our first child, what should I gift my first grandchild? And the traditional grandparent gifts were, should I get some silver or some gold or start an investment in her name? And we said, no, we don't want that. But equal to silver and gold and an investment in her name is the creation of a library for her, because it's very precious, and it is a lifelong investment actually that we're making. So I think that what I would like to communicate to parents and grandparents is that books and reading in early childhood are an investment, so they need to be prioritized. So just, I mean, whenever you're budgeting your lives with your children, instead of buying, X number of toys, invest in books instead, or at least balance it out. Having a collection at home is extremely valuable, and this can be supplemented with a library, and going to a library. I understand there are not very many good libraries in our cities. The library culture in India is still quite nascent, but they are emerging now. There are some online libraries as well. There are online communities where you can buy pre-loved books, right? There are online resources for books. So things are changing, and if where there's a will, there's a way. So as long as we know the value and importance of this early reading, there is a way to make it possible. Now, our library, of course, because it came up in this way, it has like 2,000 books in it. But I would say that, if you can even build a collection of 20 books to begin with, then take it to 50 books, then take it to 100 books, and just prioritize it and find ways to keep adding to your collection, because children like to come back to the same books. Firstly, it's important to have books in their environment, and so that they can access it whenever they like, so that they grow up with books around them. And also, they like to come back to the same books again and again. And that actually reinforces their neural pathways, reinforces their understanding of certain subjects or language or whatever that book is trying to communicate to them. So having that access at home can be very valuable.
Thammi has built a library with hundreds of books. Do you see a certain pattern that she's followed to build this library? Every school library has certain requirements, right? But do you think she's followed the same for the home library, or do you think Thammi was kind of prejudiced towards a certain genre or something like that?
Right.
I think that library kind of revealed her personality and her personal likes and dislikes. So obviously, the library, like when you construct a library, uh, uh, the idea is to ensure that the end result is having a child's personality to be well-rounded. Right, that's the objective. But then, because this was a personal library, I think somewhere the personal preferences kind of creep in. So what was your discovery?
To an extent, yes. I think so she loved collecting books for this library, like she would go to different bookstores, and she was great friends with the owners of, bookstores that stock children's books. And so she would sit and have a cup of tea with them and look at the latest books, and she would like pore over them. And I remember that she would come in laden with these books while I was pregnant, or while I was sitting there with a newborn, breastfeeding this newborn. And she would come and say, "Oh, wow, look at these books I got. Read this right now." So she would feel so passionate. So I think you're right. I mean, she could be very selective, and she could, choose the books that really spoke to her. Of course, yes. I mean, when she was creating libraries for the American Embassy School, or for Pathways schools, or for any of these international schools that she worked with and created libraries for, I mean, the scale of those libraries was completely different, and it was also across age groups. And yes, she had to make sure that, although even there, I think the thing that made her unique was that every library actually did reflect her personality. And she strongly believed that every library should reflect the personality of the librarian. And the librarian should not be this invisible person who's just doing this clerical work. The librarian needs to connect with the children, needs to read all the books, should be able to recommend the right book to the right child, should be able to talk about books with those children. So even there, her personality and her individuality definitely came through. But of course, for a home library, it could be more. At the same time, let's say 60-70% of the books were like that. I think that she was also very aware that, that she needs to be fair and she can't be prejudiced, and that she needs to have some books, that she may not immediately connect with, also, just to give the children the space for their own individuality, so that they have choices, so that it's not all about. So, for example, just because she doesn't like trucks doesn't mean there should not be any books about trucks, because the child might like trucks, or she has to give that opportunity. So she did. The books are quite diverse in the library.
So does it have a sizable number of non-fiction books, or do you think she was partial to fiction storybooks?
There is some non-fiction, but yeah, she was definitely partial to fiction and to stories. Yeah.
So, your book talks about Moon Littles and the Moon Library. So how did the concept of Moon Littles emerge? Was that your own creation, or was it the creation of your daughter? And, or, somewhere has the creativity just blended to create something?
No, that was my creation. It was my fantasy, my creation. I wanted the story to have some magic and some fantasy element to it. Because I think that when you're trying to communicate, what I was trying to communicate was an idea. And I think that when you're talking to an audience of children, communicating that idea, you have to speak in their language. And I felt that, just explaining, I mean, this couldn't be the scroll article, right? Like, it had to go beyond that. It had to, I mean, the audience for the scroll article is different from the audience for this book. And the audience for this book is children. So the idea of the magic that a library can have and the magic that books contain could, I couldn't leave that abstract. I had to concretize it. I had to communicate it to children in a particular way. And so we do. So when my mother-in-law passed away, we did use this metaphor that she's become a star. And that's how because my elder daughter was only 2 years old, 2.5 years old at that time. And my younger one was 3 months old. So for my older daughter, I mean, there was no way that we could explain where her tummy has gone all of a sudden. So we had used this metaphor that she's become a star and she's watching over her from the sky. So it was an extension of that, if she's become a star, then where could she have created a library? Where could this magical library exist? So it was just my imagination taking off from that point.
So this library, have you managed to add more books to it? Are there times where kids say, I need this book, and you're like, hey, let's check out whether the library has it? Have they managed to touch all the books?
Oh, yes. In fact, I think that the pandemic had a big role to play there, because we really we explored the length and breadth of it, the library. I think we've touched almost all the books, and I'm adding to it all the time, because I mean, I love books as well. So although I don't have my mother-in-law's expertise, I've also learned a lot from her. And I saw the way she was choosing books. She and I had many conversations about books. And just from reading those books to my children, I've learned a lot. Because of course, I mean, my own background is in literature and in writing. So I understand literature. Children's literature and picture books is new to me, but I could make that pivot and kind of start understanding the way they work as well. And in fact, to the extent that I'm quite addicted myself, I don't know what I'm going to do when my children outgrow picture books, because I don't think I will outgrow them. So I may continue to buy them for myself. Yeah, so I mean, I do my best to keep adding to the library as much as I can. I mean, it's not as organized as the way that my mother-in-law was doing it. We visit children's book stores together, like my kids and I, or I sometimes visit them on my own if I don't want to be distracted and I want to choose myself. We're also members of a neighborhood library. In Delhi, has one major children's library, which is One Up Library, and it happens to be in our neighborhood. And in fact, the founder of that, and my mother-in-law mentored her as well. And she was they were very close. So I visit, so we go to that library as well, and we kind of supplement our reading from there. Both my children are lucky enough to go to schools that also prioritize reading and have a very strong reading program and very good libraries. So we're just trying to kind of, meet this need from every direction.
So gadgets are a major distraction to kids. So how have your kids managed to balance? Do you think it's easy for them to gravitate towards books because there is a ready library at home? Do they even get tempted by gadgets, or like no, I'll watch it when I want to watch, kind of thing?
Oh yeah, I mean, we have like some screen time at home, but it's very I mean, there are boundaries around it that are kind of very accepted by them, because we've just never had that kind of open access to gadgets, So they do have an allocated TV time, and they watch TV on the big TV. So it's not like, they just constantly have access to phones and tablets. That's something we've kind of, try to stay away from. So they do watch TV, but again, it's very curated. So it's not like they're just watching rhymes on YouTube or something like that. So we choose shows together. We try to choose shows that have good literary content. There's actually some really good quality content out there where, again, with complex storylines, complex characters, and that's what they like actually, because they've grown up. I think with the books that we've read to them, they've actually grown up with an appetite for good stories, good storylines, complex characters, complex themes. So that's what they like on TV as well. But yeah, they're very okay with the fact that, okay, we're going to watch one episode or we're going to watch two episodes, so it's 20 minutes or it's 40 minutes and that's it, and then they're done as well. It's not just because of the books, it's because I think we overall have a rhythm to the day. So it's not like they know that, it's not that there's nothing else to do, so we'll be doing other activities together, or they know that, okay, now it's time to do this, or now it's time to do that, or now we're going to have like just free play time and we're going to enjoy that. But of course, books is a huge thing because I think um, I think it acts like a wonderful alternative to TV time, especially if children love books and if we have the right kind of books at home. So, we read all the time. So, for example, if we're in a car, I think some kids would end up watching something, in a car. But I mean, now my older daughter's reading herself a little bit, but sometimes even, I still read to her as well, but I would just read to them like on long journeys and things, so it wouldn't, or if we're on flights or, even at home, if I feel like they're tired, they need some downtime. Of course, bedtime is sacrosanct for us. We always read together at bedtime. So, there's a lot of reading through the day and there's an overall rhythm to the day. So screens don't really intrude very much.
So you've written for adults before, I think two books, right? Which were,
Yeah.
I think, most specific. It's specifically for parents. So how difficult or how different was it writing a children's book? Because right from the wordplay to the way you engage a child is quite different.
Yeah. The first book I wrote was a novel, and for adults, Life is Perfect. And then I contributed short stories and articles here and there to different anthologies. The second book was a parenting book linked to my work as a sleep counselor called Sleeping Like a Baby, co-authored with Neha Bhatt. So that was non-fiction, of course. And then this is a third completely different genre, which was writing for children. Absolutely, it's very different. Firstly, the first major difference is that the word count is much lower. So, you have to communicate your entire story, communicate your characters, and your main idea with very few words. So that was the first challenge. The second thing is that it's you're communicating through both words and pictures. And in my case, at least, I'm not the illustrator. In some cases, the author and the illustrator are the same. I wonder if that's a little easier in a sense, that you know what you are going to communicate via text and via visuals. But in this case, it was more about Priya and I being able to work together to figure out what should be communicated through the text and what should be communicated through the pictures. Of course, it was a huge learning process for me as well. And I think that I owe a lot to how experienced Priya Kuriyan is, and how she managed the illustrations so beautifully. So I felt like I was in very safe hands with that, and someone steering the boat very capably. But I think it's a learning process. I loved writing for children. I'm hoping that with each book I'll get better at it. But at the end of the day, as I was saying earlier, this is the world that I'm immersed in right now. Like I'm really reading a lot of children's books every day with my children, and I have this ready test audience, with me, in the sense that although I didn't read them Thammi's Gift while I was working on it, but I know what they like and what they don't like. And I know intuitively, after reading so much to them, what works and what doesn't work. So I think that since I'm so much in this space right now, it wasn't that difficult to make the jump.
I hope you come out with more books. So quickly tell our readers why they should pick up Thammi's Gift.
Oh, I think that why should they pick up Thammi's Gift? Okay, because firstly, the illustrations. The illustrations are amazing. I mean, hats off to Priya. I mean, honestly, like, the illustrations are magical. Secondly, I think that it addresses a couple of important themes. Firstly, the importance of books and reading. And this is not in a didactic way, but just the joy that is very evident in the stories, in the text and in the pictures. The joy that comes from reading and from books, I think, will be infectious for the whole family. Someone jokingly told me, oh my God, this is like a manual on how to build a reading culture at home, because there are so many images, of like a family reading in the car, or a child sitting on a pot and reading, and or bedtime reading. So it's almost, so there's a lot about that. I think it addresses death, which can be a very tricky subject with a small child, and yet it's all around us. It's a reality. Losing a grandparent is a stark possibility for a young child, especially coming out of the pandemic. Many young children have lost family members, have lost loved ones, grandparents, grandaunts, great-grandparents. And this is some feedback that I've received from parents saying that, the book resonated with my child so much, and that I felt like crying because it was speaking directly to me as the parent, and my child talked about how the loss of so and so, or the loss of so and so. So I think it allows you to discuss a very difficult and tricky yet essential topic with your child in a cushioned way, and in a slightly light, protected way. The third theme that it addresses is a big transition, like starting school. So, and again, this is a reality for young children, whether they're starting preschool or they're transitioning from preschool to big school. There is a lot of fear around it. There is fear around any big transition, whether it's moving home, whether it's the arrival of a new sibling, whether it's a parent who's been at home returning to work. And these transitions, our children need support through it. They need to be able to process their big feelings around it. So I think that this one big transition of starting school, the book has tried to address that as well. And I think that it helps children to feel understood and feel seen, that it's normal for them to feel the way that they do, and that everything is going to be okay.
I think it's a wonderful way of, keeping Thammi's library alive. I mean, what a way, you have kind of frozen it in time and kept it for the future generations. You kept, through a book, you seal the idea, and this idea is now available to so many parents and grandparents. So yeah, thank you for coming here, and all the best.
Thank you, Shamla, for such an interesting conversation, for your great questions, and for for understanding the book so well.
Thank you.